is Elin Hilderbrand.
Hello.
Welcome.
Good to see you.
I am very excited to meet Elin. We actually have not met, even though I feel like we've intersected for years. And I'm so happy to be talking about books with an actual writer today. This is fantastic. So, can you give us your origin story?
Yes. So, a lot of people ask, like, how did you end up writing beach novels set on Nantucket? So, I was raised in a blended family of 5 kids, and it was my mom, my dad, and my stepmom, and the 5 of us children. And every summer they would take us to Cape Cod for the month of July, and we rented this ramshackle cottage on a sandy lane that led to the beach, and we had all these rules that we had to follow when we were on the Cape for that month. We were not allowed to shower indoors. We had to use the outdoor shower. We were not allowed to eat indoors. We took breakfast, lunch, and dinner on the patio at the picnic table. If it was sunny, it was a beach day, and we would go down to the beach for 8 hours. My parents would slather us with copper toe number 4. That was a foam. We'd come back at the end of the day, like, radioactively glowing. And my grandmother used to say, of course, she used to say, "You all look so healthy." At night, we would go watch the sunset like it was a Broadway show. We'd get there early, get our seats early, and then the sun would go down, we'd all clap. And we used to we'd either go out for fried clams and soft serve ice cream, or we'd grill out back, and we used to play miniature golf and badminton in the side yard. Twice a summer, my father would wake us up in the middle of the night. The first time he woke us up, he would walk us down to the beach in our pajamas so we could look at the stars. And the second time he would wake us up, he would light the candles in the dining room, and we would play a game of Midnight Uno. It was a very idyllic way to grow up by anyone's standards, and I loved those summers so very much. The November after my junior year, my 16th summer, my father was killed in a plane crash. And those summers came to an end. And my 17th summer, I had to get a job. So I got a job working in a factory that made Halloween costumes. It was 1986, so
it took a Dickensian turn that I was not expecting.
I know. So it was 1986. I spent 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, folding Rambo headbands. And as I did this, sort of bemoaning my reversal of fortune, I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, but I want to find a way to get those summers back. So I ended up going to college. I went to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and my time at Hopkins, I was a creative writing major, and everyone else at Hopkins was, you guessed it, pre-med. And so my job at Hopkins was basically to go to the bar and save the seats. That was my job. So I would go and do that. When I graduated from Hopkins, I went to one of my professors, the novelist Madison Smart Bell, and I said to him, I want to be a writer. What do I do? Do I get a job? Do I go to graduate school? And he said, Ellen, if you want to write, the most important thing is to go out in the world and live. Otherwise, you won't have anything to write about. So I took those words to heart. I moved to New York City. I worked for 9 months in publishing, realized I was on the wrong end of the stick there, hated it. I quit, and I got a job. What I needed was time, so I got a job teaching, thinking I would then have my summers off. So I got a job. My first job teaching was in the New York City Public Schools, IS 227 in Queens, New York, real eye-opener there. And then I had the second school year, I got a job teaching up in Westchester County, north of the city. And I had the summer between the 2 years off. So I'm like, now is my chance. I'm going to go to the beach. So my family was still in Cape Cod, and I had been to Martha's Vineyard in college. So I thought, okay, the third point on that particular triangle is Nantucket. I'm going to go to Nantucket for the summer. So it was 1993, so I called information, got the number for the newspaper, called the newspaper, can you send me the classifieds in the mail? Then 6 days later, the classifieds came in the mail, and I started looking for a place to live, which I found.
Wow.
And I went to Nantucket for the summer, and I remember the ferry pulling into the harbor and seeing, the gray shingled buildings and the chapels of the steeples of the churches, and I thought to myself, this is the most beautiful place. I'm never leaving. And I did go back and teach the second year, and then at the end of that summer, the second teaching year, I moved to Nantucket permanently. So that was in 1994. So I've been there 30 years. And a couple years in the off season, so I would work during the summer, and then in the off season, I would travel. So the first year, I backpacked through Southeast Asia and Australia and New Zealand, and then the second off season, I backpacked through South America. I went to the Galapagos, Costa Rica, and then feeling like I had sufficiently gone out and lived, I applied to graduate school.
Right.
So I applied to the University of Iowa Writers' Workshop, which is this big, fancy, extremely well-regarded school, and I was thrilled to get in, and I get there, and I was completely miserable, totally miserable. And they had free therapy at the University of Iowa. I would go every week and cry, and I missed Nantucket, and they didn't have any water, and it was all silos and pig farms and cornfields, and I was really a literal fish out of water. And my therapist said, well, I think it's pretty clear what you must do. And for a second, I thought, she's going to tell me to quit, which is so weird that a therapist would tell you to quit. She said, you need to start writing a book about Nantucket.
Hey.
And that is what I did. I started writing my first novel, The Beach Club.
Did you workshop that novel?
I did not workshop the novel. I did not do well at the University of Iowa. Everyone hated my stuff. My first professor, Frank Conroy, who ran the program, said, you will never be published. So he was wrong. I knew he was wrong when he said it, but it was very painful to hear.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's amazing. Let's talk about, so the last book that just came out last summer is The 5-Star Weekend, which is fantastic if you haven't. So good. Why don't you tell us how that idea came to you, and have you yourself managed to pull off a 5-Star Weekend?
So the novel that came out last summer is called The 5-Star Weekend. It's a little bit of a high concept novel in that a woman who's just lost her husband invites 4 friends to come to Nantucket for the weekend, and it's one friend from every stage of her life. So her best friend from high school comes, her best friend from growing up, her best friend from college, her best friend from raising her children, and then her best friend from middle age. And as some of you may have found, as I've found, it's hard to make new friends in middle age because you're not necessarily out and about doing things. You sort of have your routines. And the woman, my character, is a food blogger, and so for her middle-aged friend, she picks her most ardent follower, someone she's never met in real life. She just follows her on the blog. So it's a little bit of a wild card. And the way I got the idea is that I have a friend who's a writer, a novelist and memoirist, and she, in 2020, she came to Nantucket and she sent me a text. She said, can you get a drink? Now, it was the fall of 2020. We weren't really doing that. But I said, okay. So we went to the hotel and we sat at a table by ourselves with our mask. Like, it was really very strange. And she said, I'm here on a weekend. She said, one of my very dear friends has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. She has invited one friend from each stage of her life, like her best friends from each stage of her life, to come celebrate her life while she's still feeling okay. And she said, and I hate everybody else. And as soon as she said that, I'm like,
that's a book.
That's a novel. I'm like, that is a novel. And I said, why wouldn't you write about this? And she goes, it's not really my kind of novel. She's like, it's your kind of novel. And so I said, okay. And then there were certain things that she said I could not use, which she told me, and I did not use. And but I changed it. And when I started writing it, I fully intended my main character to be dying and to have her friends. And I thought, you know what, this is too sad. Yeah. It was too sad. And so I changed it so the husband dies. Much better.
And he kind of deserved it.
Much better. And one of the great things about the book is that I think people across the country have started putting together their own 5-star weekends. And people have asked, like Julia just asked, like, would I do a 5-star weekend? And I can't. I don't know how to explain it. There's one person, and it's the person I grew up with, who is so vastly different from my other friends in life that I just feel like it would be yet more of a disaster than the weekend I wrote about. So I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it.
Fair enough, fair enough. Tell us about the next book, though, this summer's book.
Right. So my last Nantucket-based summer novel is coming out in June. It's called Swan Song.
And what number is it?
It's number 30. Number 30 is coming out in June, and it's my last Nantucket-based novel. I am retiring, and there's a really
hush
good
fell over the room.
There's a very good reason for it, which is that since the summer of 2000, I have written a summer novel every single summer. And for 7 years in there, I wrote 2 books a year because I wrote a holiday series, and then I wrote a series set in St. John in the Virgin Islands. And I was raising 3 children, and it was so much work. And I feel myself coming to a close of my natural material. Nantucket is 4 miles wide and 13 miles long.
It's a small island.
It's a small island. And I've covered every part of the island, every possible plot that would happen on Nantucket in the summer, I have covered. And so I feel like the smart thing to do, I could take another contract and spin it out and keep going. I don't want to repeat myself. I don't want the quality of the novels to drop off. And so I've decided to finish, just call it a retirement. Swan Song is about a wealthy couple who comes from out of nowhere and buys this enormous house that is doomed by climate change. It's going to be underwater in 80 years. They don't care. They throw all these fabulous parties. They hire a personal assistant. They really shake up the status quo of Nantucket social life. And then at the beginning of the novel, in the prologue, we find out that their house is burned down and that their personal assistant is missing off their boat. And so it's a little bit of like a mystery to find out what happened. And then we go back and see how this couple sort of infiltrated Nantucket. There are a lot of familiar faces in this book. So if you've been reading my novels, the Chief is in it, Blonde Sharon is in it, Fast Eddie is in it. But you do not need to have read any of my other books to enjoy this. All of my summer novels are standalones. This is a standalone. If you have read them, you will be delighted, I think.
Get the band back together.
Get the band back together.
Good, nice. And let's talk about the adaptation of The Perfect Couple, if you can.
Yeah. So my novel, The Perfect Couple, finally, after 23 years, I have finally gotten something to the screen, or I will as soon as it comes out. So The Perfect Couple is being adapted by Netflix into a 6-part limited series. It stars Nicole Kidman, Liev Schreiber, Dakota Fanning, Megan Fahey from The White Lotus is in it, and Eve Hewson, who is Bono's daughter, is the lead. So it has like a really stacked cast. They shot it on Cape Cod, and then did the B-roll over on Nantucket. We did it during the strike. It was extremely tense. They got picketed by the writers at the end of June, and then they wanted to do a shot in September over in Nantucket with one actor, one guy driving the car up the street. That got picketed. So it was really, really stressful. But they managed to wrap. We wrapped at the beginning of January. And so it will come out this year. I have not been given a date when it will come out, but finally. And I'm so excited because it really is going to be done, I think, beautifully. They've spent a lot of money.
The timing is actually kind of amazing as you're wrapping up the writing of the series.
Yeah.
We will have something actually to watch of yours.
Exactly.
That's great.
And I have 6 or 7 projects in development. Hollywood is the most, as you know, just crazy town for getting something. I think something like only 10% of projects in development get made.
That seems high.
It is nonsense. That sounds high.
That sounds high.
Yeah. So
that's amazing. And so you're saying retirement, but you don't stop things. So what else are you planning to do?
That's a good question. So I have signed a 2-book deal with my daughter, who's 18. We are writing 2 novels set at a New England boarding school. So this is what happened. So I have 3 children. My oldest went to Nantucket High School and graduated. He had the kind of high school experience that you see in the movies. That's not necessarily a good thing. Like the big parties at my house, like when I was on tour, and the Nantucket police know my name and know where I live very well. Like kids flushing beer cans down the toilet, that kind of thing. And then my middle son, Dawson, he went to Nantucket High School for 2 years and was doing so poorly that his father and I decided he needed to go to boarding school. So we sent him to boarding school. He was senior prefect, which is like senior class president. He's at the University of Miami, and just like far exceeded our expectations, which was so exciting. My daughter watched the 2 of them and decided she also wanted to go to boarding school. She goes to St. George's in Newport, Rhode Island, which is very, very, I'm just going to say, like, snobby. It's possibly the snobbiest place in the whole world. And she gets there, And she's calling me like 5-6 times a day, she's doing fine. She likes it. She's telling me the stuff that happens. I am like, we are writing a book about this. We're writing a book about this. By the spring of her first year, I'm like, we're writing a novel. And so I pitched it to my publisher. Talk about good timing. I just announced my retirement, and I'm like, okay, I also could I do 2 books about the boarding school? They were like, or I said a book. They were like, we're going to give you a 2-book deal. So it focuses on a group of kids, the head of school, the teachers, the parents, and then these 4 kids that are juniors, and then we'll follow them into senior year. They will be adult books, and I say they are very adult because the stuff that goes on at this boarding school is like completely off the chain and really crazy. But that will be out in October.
I'm curious, so you're doing this as the kids are going to be 16 or whatever, but you're writing it as an adult book?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's if anybody's read my novel, The Hotel Nantucket, it's tiered that way. So it's not only about the kids. It's the head of school, who's a woman of color. It's the teachers, one of whom is like a failed novelist who like comes to teach the English class, and then the 4 kids. And so Shelby is helping me write the 4 kids, and then I'm of course doing the adults. There hasn't been a boarding school novel for Gen Z, right? So we had.
No, it's true.
I mean, obviously, like A Separate Peace and Catcher in the Rye are, beacons of a certain generation. Curtis Sittenfeld wrote Prep. That was sort of the millennial version. Of course, there's Harry Potter, but there hasn't been a deep dive into a boarding school, a literary boarding school novel that's set at Gen Z. Gen Z, my daughter, they have their own language, and I can't understand them. And that's why I need her to help me write it. Like,
your translator.
Yeah, she's my translator, and I have been sending her pages, and she goes through, and she's like, no one my age would ever say this. You are such a boomer. That's what she says. And I'm Gen X. I said, I'm Gen X. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, boomer.
Okay, boomer.
So how is that writing process? I'm just very curious about that. How is that writing process going? I mean, you send her pages and
I give her scenes. She sends me the scenes. I edit her scenes. But the most important thing is that I send her what I'm writing, because it has to be, like, the most important thing for me is it has to sound authentically like these kids. And their life and the way they experience things is not the way we grew up, right? We grew up without the internet. We grew up without cell phones. And they can't conceive like having to pick up a phone, never mind a rotary phone, just a phone that you have to no. Or not like,
you have to stay in one place.
Like I travel, like when I'm telling you about all that traveling I did, we did it with a book and a map. Like, how did we do it? We didn't know. We couldn't look at the menu of a restaurant before we got there. Who does that? Right? So, but the way that these kids they're so different because of the way that they've been raised by the
machines.
By the machines, totally.
Raised by a pack of wild machines. So you are transitioning. I mean, it seems ridiculous. Only you would retire and then have a 2-book contract and then also have a retirement project. But what are you retiring to do now? What is the when you're not writing?
Nothing, but I don't want to do anything, and then that's really the truth. Like, I look at people walking their dogs, when I'm rushing from who knows where to who, and I'm like, how do they have time to do that? How do they have time? I never have time to do anything. I'm always in a hurry. I'm in Palm Springs for 18 hours. And it's that kind of frenetic life is what I'm trying to leave behind. Like, I really need to I'm going to read. I'm probably going to work on another novel.
But slowly.
But at my own pace.
At an Iowa Writers Conference pace.
And not be on my own, not be beholden to anybody, and just, really enjoy, this beautiful life that I've earned that I just can't even enjoy it because I'm just so crazy. I do 40 speaking events a year. I mean, it's bananas. And so retirement for me will just be exactly the same thing that I'm doing now, but just on my own terms, I think.
Yes, not trying to do a book a year
Right.
contract with that. Yes. You are also starting a podcast. You have a podcast.
Yes.
Into season 2?
It's going into season 2. I have a podcast.
Do you see why I don't believe her? Yeah. Do you see why?
I have a podcast called Book, Speech, and Beyond. If you guys love to read, this is the thing about this podcast, and I want to be very clear. this is not a book podcast where you have to read some obscure person that you've never heard of. We, in season 1, had on, Colleen Hoover, Taylor Jenkins Reid, Kristen Hanna. We had Jenna Bush Hager on. We had Ann Patchett on. We had the biggest names of novelists that you're already reading. Our season 2, we're going to have John Grisham on. We're going to have Michael Connolly on. We're going to have Barbara Kingsolver on. We're going to have Leanne Moriarty on. We're going to hopefully get Ina Garten. Like, we're going to have people that you want to hear. So because I'm a slow reader, I did not want to do a podcast where I had to be reading books all the time and where you felt like you had to read the books. So instead, because of the position that I've gotten to, I can call anybody and just say, will you please be on my podcast? And they're like, of course. Colleen Hoover, she was the first one I called. She's like, anything for you. I'm like, okay, thank you.
She's so lovely.
And then I know. And then to everybody else, I said, Colleen Hoover's doing my podcast. And they were like, yeah, of course I'll do it. So she was my golden ticket.
That's wonderful. And you co-host it?
So I co-host it with my marketing person at the Nantucket bookstores, Tim Ehrenberg. I call him my work husband. He is Tim Talks Books on Instagram, and he does all the heavy lifting. He comes up with the questions, and he is. I couldn't do it without him. But he's a wonderful song and dance guy too, so he's really entertaining on the podcast.
Actually, that reminds me. Let's talk about the Nantucket bookstore, because you're doing a special edition of the next book, Swan Song.
Yes.
For them.
So Nantucket, although small, has 2 independent bookstores. They're both owned by the same person, but they're 2 distinct stores. And I sign during the summer every Wednesday at 11. There's a long, long line, which is so exciting, and I'm so humbled by that. But we sell pre-orders of my new novels, and they're signed and personalized. I do 5,000 copies, and I sign and personalize, and we send them across the country. And this year, we're doing a special edition of the Nantucket book. They'll have extra content, and it has beautiful end pages. So end pages, when you open a book, are the inside, and it's all these Nantucket scenes pulled from my novels. It's going to be absolutely gorgeous. And so we're selling that out of Nantucket Books, which is really, it's the only independent bookstore ever to get their own edition of any novel.
I love that. I mean, again, just this is what I mean by, and this is not to, I'm not blowing smoke here, but you are so conscientious of the entire publishing ecosystem and supporting other writers and supporting readers and supporting bookstores, and you just have a great, you're an ambassador of books.
Thank you.
That's how I feel.
Thank you.
And that's why, in your retirement, I'm really looking forward to the book influencer era of Elin Hilderbrand.
Yeah.
I think it's just wonderful. So you've been in this, so it's funny. It's not like you've written so many books, but you've done them so quickly that you've been around a long time, but it's not like, we're not talking about a 60-year career here, right?
Right.
So how has publishing changed, even in the space that you've been in it?
Okay, so when I started, there were no ebooks, right? And then ebooks came. I remember it. I'm going to say, you will know better than I will, Julia, but I remember it as 2009.
Yeah, that's about right.
Being the year that it was really a thing. It probably came before that, but 2009, and I was, in 2009, I think I sold 1/3 of my novels in ebook and 2/3 in print. And then at some point after that, those numbers switched. And then I was selling 2/3 in ebook and 1/3 in print. And then ebooks sort of took it down. I don't know why, but ebooks sort of went down. But one of the reasons why it's so excellent that you are the person interviewing me is that this past year, and again, I'm never paying attention because I'm too busy, but this past year, audio really took off. So I sold over 100,000 copies on audio this year, which was like a number that like finally got my attention. And do you want to talk a little bit about how you've seen the shift to audio?
Sure. Yeah, sure. First of all, her books are narrated by Erin Bennett, who's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful narrator, and also an incredible singer.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So she has kind of a jaunty, like throwback Andrews Sisters kind of thing.
Oh, cute.
It's she's great. So audio went through this I mean, it's been around forever. There was a boom in 2012 when Amazon bought Audible, and they sent down this directive, like every book ever written needs to have an audio version. And that was the first boom. We then saw in 2020, the surprise of everything was that I think there was this feeling, at least I felt this way, that as soon as the pandemic hit, people would not be commuting anymore. And maybe they wouldn't listen to audiobooks anymore, because we had sort of bought into the line that people were just doing audio to multitask for convenience. And it was exactly the opposite. A whole new group of listeners came in and discovered audiobooks and were actually electing to listen to audiobooks as opposed to other forms of media. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they were on screens all day. You're in Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting. You don't want to look at a screen at night. And so people would listen, while they puzzled or they did laundry. And there was also the sense of, for a lot of people who were isolated, and I get this note a lot, like hearing another human voice in your ear at that time, in that very scary time and very isolating time, was a connection and some kind of human conduit that people really needed. And so I saw it was just this wonderful reversal. I thought the industry was over. And instead, it became massive, just huge. And there's now people they come in, they find a narrator that they like, and then they look at the narrator's list of titles, and because we're much more prolific than authors, even ones who are writing a book a year, if we're narrating 50 books a year, we're constantly refreshing the algorithm. Authors are able to be more visible to readers because they're finding them through their narrators, and it's now a absolutely massive part of publishing in a way that it was not previously.
Will you do 50 books a year?
I used to do 70 books a year.
Holy cow.
I do 4 now.
Okay, now you do 4, okay.
But no,
70 books a year?
Yeah.
Do I read 70 books a year? No.
Well,
Okay.
and you're doing it twice, because you're reading the book ahead of time, you're prepping the book, and then you're recording it. So.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Which is why when people ask me, like, what do I read for fun? I'm like, I don't even understand that concept.
Right. And let me ask you this question, like, so you don't get to pick?
At this point, I do get to pick.
Okay. Because if you are reading something that you're just not enjoying,
Yeah.
that's acting.
It's acting. That's my job.
Right, okay.
And make people love it.
And make people love it. Yeah. And then my other question is, do you ever feel like editing it when you're reading it? Like, this could use a little something.
So and I'm not joking, but audiobook narrators are often the first line of defense against really lazy copy editing. So another thing that's, I think, changed in publishing is the editorial staffs have just been cut down, and especially if you're, maybe not if you're in your position, but if you're a mid-list author or something, it maybe gets one pass at editorial, if that. And I got my copy edits back, and I actually sent them back. And I was like, there's no way it's this clean. I've never been this clean a writer. Please try again.
Right, wow.
And because when you're reading, you find things. And I have when it's an author that I know, I just have an open text chain going with page 73, this happened, So I do perform unpaid copy editing services.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
How many of you listen to audiobooks? So almost half, would we say? That's amazing.
Yeah.
And why do you listen to audiobooks?
Well, for example, the book Horse.
Okay, right, Geraldine Brooks.
Yes.
Stages a century apart. That you knew what stage you were in of this book by the narration.
Okay.
And then you go into the Smithsonian, you knew you were with a scientist, or you were with the jockey, it's a fabulous way to listen to enjoy a book. Really enjoy it.
She's saying, sorry for everyone in the back, she was saying that by having different voices that cue different sections of the book, you know when you're going back in time, you know when you're in present day, when you're in the Smithsonian, you have those auditory, it's a very distinct marker of the time in the book and the setting. Yeah. But Erin's done, has she done all of yours?
She's done all of mine for like the last I don't even know.
Yeah.
I would say
10?
Yeah, for as long as like when it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, easily 10. I mean more
Yeah.
because I've written so many, but a lot. Yeah, and she's just my person.
Yeah. Yeah, because authors find narrators who really match their voice. That's the relationship that I have with Taylor Jenkins Reid and Emily Henry. And you find someone who just gets your sensibility, understands your voice, and is able to bridge that for the between the author and the listener. And I love my job. I just have issues with the audio publishing side of things, but
Right. Do you want to talk about that or no?
Well, so after this whole thing about how much audio has exploded, the thing that kind of blows people's minds is that narrators actually don't get royalties. So we're paid a flat fee, a very, very, very minimal, and I mean that seriously, considering how much money is being made, a flat fee to record the book that does not take into account prep time, reading it, the studio time. It's per finished hour. And no matter how successful a book ends up being, it's we don't see any back end, which is, as an actor, I still get royalties on, or residuals on, movies I did when I was 12. And so it's just something I never understood. But right now I started a company called Audiobrary that is trying to change the pay structure for authors and for narrators to actually give narrators some skin in the game. And that's my attempt at trying to fix this, because the publishers are not going to be incentivized to fix this in any other way. They don't need to. So I had to kind of just, you get tired of saying, someone really should do something about this. And you kind of have to admit at a certain point that I guess you're the someone.
Right. So for those of you who don't understand royalties, which I didn't understand royalties until literally like 5 years ago, basically, if you think of it this way, so if I earn out, so I will get something called an advance against royalties. So let's say my advance is $10,000. The publisher basically bets on you and they say, okay, we're going to pay Ellen $10,000 for her new book, and I earn back that advance at 15% of the cover price, or basically $4. So I have to sell 2,500 copies of my book in order to earn back the $10,000. After I've sold 2,500 copies, every copy after that, I get $4. So if I sell, 100,000 copies, then I get 90,000 times 4, which I don't even know what that is, $360,000. But, and that money comes to me later. So that's a royalty. So I've written books. One of the greatest days of the year is coming up, it's February 1st. I get royalties from my first publisher, my first 5 books. And I'm literally getting paid on work I did in 2001, which is so great because the check comes and you're like, this is amazing. But what Julia is saying is that when you sell the audio, and audiobooks are not cheap, as we all know, the narrator, the person who's doing the work, does not, they just get a flat fee and they do, you could be selling, Where the Crawdads Sing, that sold, probably.
I see that every time Cassandra Campbell narrated that, and every time that book stays on the audio bestseller list, I'm just like, another year.
Where she's not, where she's
year.
just not getting, can you imagine having 6 million copies of that, or 500,000 or however many audios she sold, and not seeing any money from that? So it is very unfair.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Anywho.
It's a problem in publishing.
It is.
One of the interesting things about this particular talk is that, I've been an author for a long time, and Julia's an author and a narrator, and so you won't hear this kind of inside publishing talk at any of the other venues, because we're
the only people who actually care about publishing.
Yeah.
So we have enough time that if someone has a burning question, we'd love to hear it. So I'm going to wrap this up though with, I like to ask authors about the books that have built them, essentially. So I have a little fast 5 questions session for you. Let's start with the book that made you a reader.
So I think the book that made me a reader was Little Women, and that could be true for all of us, but I read it, I don't know, I was 9 or 10 years old, and of course loved Joe, But I think for young girls like that, I could also say it was like sort of very, very different book, which is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Both where you can, they're aimed at people who are young women and in Little Women, of course, Joe wants to be a writer, and that was me. I wanted to be a writer. And then Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret just had such wide appeal because we were all going through the same things in adolescence.
Yeah, and it made you want to find more books where you were reflected and
Right.
where you could see yourself.
100%.
This is impossible, but favorite book?
So my favorite book of all time is a book called Family Happiness by Laurie Colwin. Laurie Colwin she died a long time ago. She died in 1991 or 92. She was a very New York writer, and she also was a foodie. So 2 of her favorite books that she's written are called Home Cooking and More Home Cooking, which are memoirs, but all about food, and they have recipes in them. Family Happiness is the best of her novels, and this is why I love it. It is it's set in New York City, Upper West Side, rich family. There are the parents, and then the main character is this woman named Polly Demarest, and Polly has this perfect little life. Her husband is an attorney. She's got 2 cute little kids. You know, her parents are nearby. They go and have they call it Sunday breakfast every week, but it's really at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever. And she's having an affair, Polly is, with a painter who lives down in Soho. And it was written in 1982, so it sort of has all that, like the great old New York stuff, sort of like a Woody Allen movie before Woody Allen was ruined. And like all that great, like, you know, great rich detail of New York in the 1980s. And the thing I love about this novel is that you love Polly so much. You know she's having this affair, and her husband's a great guy, right? And she loves her husband, and she loves her parents, and she's really living this double life. She is, you know, a person who needs something for herself, and this affair ends up being what she has for herself. But you do not pass judgment on her. And so every single time I sit down to write a book, I'm trying to write Family Happiness. Because every single time I write a book, I want to have flawed human beings who you love. And she does it so perfectly in that novel. Book of the Month is bringing out a new edition of Family Happiness, and I will be writing the foreword for that.
That's
yeah,
great.
So you guys will all be able to get it on your Book of the Month club.
Oh, that's so fun.
Definitely, it is so charming and heartwarming and rich, and there's food and there's like New Yorky stuff. It's just
I wonder
so.
if there's audio.
It's so great. You should find out. Truly, call them because it is. Oh my God.
Okay. What is a book that you find yourself thinking about often? So this is not necessarily like the best book ever, but it just something that you return to or think about.
So one of the
that
books
lives rent free in your head.
Right. So one of the books that I think about often is 1,000 Acres by Jane Smiley. I read it in 1993, and it's about it's a retelling of King Lear. That makes it sound very dull and boring, and it's set on a farm in Iowa. And but I love the aspect of it. I love is the farm wife part of it, and I'm like, I could be a farm wife. I should be a farm wife. Like, she's like taking care of the household and like doing the chores and making all these fabulous like church things for her church picnic socials. I'm like, this should be me. But I mean, she's also embroiled in this whole situation with her family. But I love that book. I think about it all the time.
Okay. What are you reading now?
Right now I'm reading, so one of the things that happens when you're a novelist is that you receive galleys, which are the advanced copies of every single book that's coming out the next year. So I have stacks and stacks and stacks.
So what are you not reading?
Of
right
galleys.
now?
Well, I can only read one book at a time. The galley I'm reading right now comes out the same day. The book comes out the same day as my own book. It's called Same as It Ever Was by a writer named Claire Lombardo. Mm-hmm. Claire Lombardo wrote The Most Fun We Ever Had. Such a good book. The Most Fun We Ever Had was such a good book. So then her editor said, can I send you this book? It's very thick. It's 562 pages. I do not like thick books. I like things that move along. However, she also went to Iowa. She is such a talented writer that I started it Wednesday night. Where are we? What day is it? Friday. And I'm 115 pages in. You guys, for me, this is a miracle. It is so good. So in addition to buying Swan Song on June 11th, I would encourage you to also look at Same as It Ever Was by Claire Lombardo.
What's a book that you wish you'd written?
50 Shades of Grey. Had I known.
Right. Talk about royalties.
It was going, you know, that you were going to write S&M, you know, basically soft porn and make millions and billions of dollars. Yeah, I would have done that.
And then you'd be done.
And then I would
Just
have
leave.
retired a long time ago.
Amazing. Okay, does anyone have a question? We have 5 minutes if anyone has a, yes?
Can you tell me the hooplas and the cloud video or cloud library and all those things, how that works into the your royalties and that sort of thing?
Oh, how does Hoopla and how does,
Canopy,
yeah. So she's asking, like, how does this work with royalties? So any sale is a sale, and when it's a subscription model, that's counting as a sale. So Ellen is getting royalties on anything from those services. And libraries are also, libraries buy copies. So you're buying which I think for digital is like a certain number of circulations.
Okay.
And then it,
I don't know.
Like, no, okay.
I don't know.
So
Julia is really the expert on this.
librarians are the ones who know this, but yes, it's by circulation. It's a certain number of times it can be circulated, and then they have to, yes. Libraries actually have the harder end of this deal, I'll be honest. It's very expensive for libraries to buy copies, but that's why if you are interested in a book, feel free to request it from your library, because if they know someone's going to want it and it's worth paying for, you can always do that, and it benefits the author. So, yes?
Silly question. Will you consider putting in a glossary for those of us who don't understand your daughter's age?
Oh, okay.
Did everyone hear that?
Oh my
Okay.
God.
She asked.
I'm writing that in my phone.
She
Okay.
asked if she would consider putting in a glossary of Gen Z terms for this new book.
I'm going to put it in the back.
Honestly,
I'm going to put it in the
and
back.
for the ebook, like a hyperlink footnote sort of situation where you can
Yeah.
tap it and get the definition.
Yeah. Oh my God, so good.
Is Urban Dictionary still a thing? Because that's how I used to deal with my girls.
Urban Dictionary.
Dictionary,
Probably
yeah.
not.
Yeah.
But I mean, I look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they keep it updated. They must keep it updated. That is such a good idea. I'm going to use that
happens
idea.
here.
What is your name? Lori. Lori Scott. Lori. I'm giving you credit, Lori at the palm, because that is such a good idea.
Anyone? Yes.
We also need a glossary of text message acronyms too.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Text
Good
message
idea.
speak glossary. That's
Yes.
where Urban Dictionary comes in handy.
We're doing that.
Yes,
We're
sir.
doing that.
Ellen, Nantucket has really changed over the years, especially recently. I would think there's a lot of new material out there.
So the funny thing is as I was talking to somebody else about this earlier, Nantucket never really changes because, you know, the downtown, like you're not allowed, so for those of you who've never been, the downtown, there's only one town. Martha's Vineyard has 7 towns. There's one town, and we call it town. I think its official
Don't
name
need a
is,
glossary
I think
for
its
that
official
one.
name is Nantucket Town. And it's 4 square blocks, and it's cobblestone streets and brick sidewalks, and these antique homes and buildings that you cannot change. Okay, the most powerful people on Nantucket is what's called the HDC, the Historic District Commission. They have to approve everything. I live about 1.2 miles out of town. My house, like you can't put in skylights. You can't change the color. You have to have gray shingles. You can't change the color of your front door. You can't do anything without talking to the HDC. So all the buildings in the historic district are the same as they would have been 150 years ago. But I mean, the businesses switch out. So like restaurants are new, and the billionaires coming in on their jets, like that's all new. But
You've covered.
I've
ground,
covered
though.
it
You've
all.
Yeah.
Yeah. If there's anything
If there's
new,
a new billionaire.
there's a new grocery store. Like there was a new grocery store. Well, I think it's 2 years old, and so that went right into the new book. Like anything new, I'm like, I'm taking it. I'm taking it. I'm taking it. I'm taking it. Yeah.
Start pulling in Nora Roberts and start creating the businesses.
Right.
So you can populate your novels with them.
There you go.
What a
That's what I'm gonna
genius. Yes, last question, quickly.
Write a book every year. I'm just amazed. Do you think of other books while you're in the process of like writing it and then having it published?
Exactly.
That's why she needs
That's
a break.
exactly right. It is so hard. So basically, my year starts in, let's say my year starts in January, and I will, when I go into writing a book, I always like have an idea of the characters, like, but just an idea. it is like moving in with new roommates, right? So have a lot of you dropped your children off at college? You meet the roommate on the first day, you're like, he seems perfectly nice. Okay, well then month 3, you're like, wow, you know a heck of a lot more about the roommate than you did on day 1. And so every day that you spend with them writing is a day that you're learning the characters. And so you're learning them, and then it's just a process. But you cannot know what's going to happen at the end of the book when you start, because you don't know these people and you're writing them, and it's so terrifying. And every summer, so I start in January, every summer there's a week where I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm like, this novel sucks. This novel's gonna fail. I don't know where this is going. I'm having a panic, like I'm just panicked because I haven't quite figured it out. And I just have learned to sit with the discomfort and been like, okay, I will figure it out. It's gonna come to me eventually. And thank God, that's another reason why I'm retiring. Every single book has been like, okay, I figured it out. You learn them, you figure out what's happening. But yes, it is so stressful. It is
You need a
just,
break.
yeah.
On that note,
It's stressful.
she's going to be signing out there
Thank
too.
you. Thank you guys.